You're watching Al Jazeera. I'm Sahil Rahman, and these are our top stories. The Australian High Court has ruled that Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce was wrongly elected for holding dual citizenship. 5 other politicians have also been removed from Parliament for holding dual citizenship. There'll now be a by-election for the Deputy Prime Minister's parliamentary seat. Andrew Thomas has more from Sydney.
The High Court's decision was essentially any MP who'd been born abroad, even to Australian parents, or whose parents had been born abroad, should have done some investigation as to whether they had citizenship of another country. And if they didn't, then they were ineligible for Australia's Parliament when they stood. And that applies to 5 of the 7 MPs that they were considering. Crucially, they have ruled that Barnaby Joyce, Australia's Deputy Prime Minister, is ineligible to sit in Parliament. So that has 2 consequences. First, it means that Australia's government, which only had a majority of 1 in the lower House of Representatives, no longer has a majority at all. And if Barnaby Joyce does not win a by-election, now due in December in his area, then the government in Australia could fall because of this. But second, because Australia's Deputy Prime Minister has also been a minister in the government making decisions when he wasn't eligible, it throws into question all the decisions that he has been making. And that opens up the possibility of lots of legal cases questioning some of Australia's government's big decisions over recent months and years.
A report by UN war crimes investigators has blamed Syria's government for a chemical weapons attack which sparked international outrage in April. More than 80 people were killed when the nerve agent sarin was dropped on the rebel-held town of Khan Shaykhun. 3 people have been killed in violence during Kenya's repeat presidential election. Voting has been postponed in 4 counties due to the violence. The Election Commission estimates 48% voter turnout in an election that was boycotted by the main opposition. The US Defense Secretary Jim Mattis is visiting the South Korean capital, Seoul. He's joined by Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford. It comes ahead of a planned visit by the US President Donald Trump in 2 weeks' time. And US President Donald Trump has declared opioid addiction a public health emergency. The government will now have more power to address the issue and more freedom to change legislation. It's estimated more than 64,000 Americans died last year due to opioid addiction and overdose. 2,800 documents relating to the death of the former US President John F. Kennedy have been made available by the US National Archive. Some of the records will remain classified on the advice of the CIA and the FBI. President Donald Trump has ordered a 180-day review so that government agencies could look again at the remaining documents and justify why any should be withheld. Our White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett has more from Washington, D.C.
Speaking of the White House, President Trump said that the opioid epidemic in the United States is the worst drug crisis in American history. With the signing of this presidential memorandum, the president says this is a critical first step in addressing the epidemic.
For too long, we have allowed drugs to ravage American homes, cities, and towns. We owe it to our children and to our country to do everything in our power to address this national shame and this human tragedy. We must stop the flow of all types of illegal drugs into our communities.
Many people are disappointed the president has stopped short of declaring this a national emergency. Had that occurred, this would have provided the necessary federal funding that states say they need in order to address this crisis. Instead, by calling this a public health emergency, what this will do is, in essence, redirect existing funds, something that many critics say stops short of the president's promise, not only in the campaign trail, but also as president. Still, many acknowledge this is an important first step, one they hope will push the U.S. Congress to take measures even further.
I'll be back with more news in 30 minutes. Next on Al Jazeera, it's Al Jazeera World. Do stay with us.